Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
If you're like most dentists in the United States and Canada, chances are you're doing some form or many forms of marketing, whether that's Google pay-per-click, Facebook, postcards, newsletters, billboards. You're doing something in an effort to get more new patients. But what are you supposed to do when your marketing isn't working? You're spending money, but you're just not seeing the number of new patients that you think you should be seeing. Well, that's what I want to talk about in this week's episode of Dental Business RX, specifically what to do when your marketing just isn't working. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And the way I've structured this episode is almost like a checklist. You could take the points that I'm raising in this episode, if all of a sudden you find you're not getting enough new patients, and apply them to your practice and figure out A, where the problem is, and B, what actions you should take to fix it. So in order to kind of give you an overview of this, let's first look at the 4 basic steps that go into getting a new patient. They're very simple. You know these, but we're going to put them all together as one group. 4 basic steps are very simple. Number 1, we need someone who's interested. Number 2, we need them to respond. Number 3, we need them to schedule. And number 4, they show up. That's simple. Interest, response, schedule, show up. Those are our 4 points. So how would you get somebody interested? That would be marketing. That might be a referral. They might have seen they looked for dentists near me and they found you on Google. So then they contact your office. That's your response. That's someone actually responding to your ad. Even if I tell a friend about your practice and they call you, that's a response. All right. That's step 2. Step 3, they get scheduled by your receptionist. So that shows you your receptionist plays a large role in your marketing process. And step 4, they're actually showing up in the practice. So if you want to fix something, what you'd normally do is you'd start from the end product, which in this case is a new patient in the dental chair, and work your way backwards. All right. So that's how I'm going to structure this checklist, so to speak, that I'm giving you in this podcast. We're going to start with the end product. You work your way back. All right. So let's start with, we don't have enough new patients. We're just, there's no new patients. So where would we look first? Well, generally, if we're not having enough new patients, there's going to be one of 2 problems. A, not enough were scheduled, or B, we've had a good amount scheduled or an adequate amount scheduled, and we have a lot of no-shows. So let's pick up this no-show issue for a second. If I have a lot of no-shows with new patients, it's going to come down to a couple of basic things. All right. There's always going to be some outliers. This particular, maybe you did Groupon or something and not a lot of people showed up or something. There's always going to be the outliers. All right. But let's start with the most common reasons people are going to no-show. First one would be that the procedure at reception was broken somehow. How the person was scheduled, how they were confirmed, etc., was broken. All right. Maybe you changed something. Maybe you were doing it one way and there was not a lot of no-shows, and then all of a sudden you changed it and now you have a lot of no-shows. So it's something you're going to want to look for. The other thing is, believe it or not, poor availability. Something that you might not think about, but poor availability, especially for a new patient, will create issues where people will schedule and they won't show up. And this is something you want to think about, especially if you're going on a big new patient acquisition campaign. If you're marketing like crazy and you're doing everything you can to get more new patients, and the first available appointment that you have is 3 weeks from now, it's almost like you're wasting your money. Because I want you to play this scenario out, how it would actually work for a real person. I'm going to call your practice. I saw you on Google. I saw you on Facebook, or a friend told me about your office. And, I'm looking for a dentist. I just moved to the area. So I call your office and I'm excited, right? And realize my connection to your practice is very, very fragile right now. I don't know you and you don't know me. So it's not like I have any brand loyalty yet. So I call your office and I go, I just moved to the area. I'd like to get my teeth cleaned. And you go, great. Our first appointment that's available is 3.5 weeks from now. That's a huge letdown. There's nothing making me loyal or connected to your practice. There's a really good chance I'm not going to schedule, or I'm going to schedule and call another office and, call you back later and tell you I found someone who can see me sooner. So here's the thing that you want to, and I wanted to mention this early in the episode. You have to be able to see new patients within 24 to 48 hours. And I don't just mean emergencies. Any new patient has to be able to be seen within 24 to 48 hours. Now, you might be listening to this and go, okay, cool, I can do that. Or there's no way I could do that. Well, there absolutely is. MGE clients do it all the time. And that in and of itself will increase your number of new patients because you've created more availability. As far as how you do it, you might have to block out time in the schedule. If you're seeing new patients in hygiene, new patient initials in hygiene, obviously the doctor's doing an exam, but they're going through the hygienist. You might have to, and hygiene's booked. You might need to add more hygiene, or you might need to block time or put them on the doctor's schedule at that point, at least for the exam, to get them in soon. But no matter what you do, you have to be able to see a new patient within 24 to 48 hours. If this is a big thing and you can't figure out your way around it, give us a call and we'll help you with this, because this is something that is critical for your new patient campaign. So we have the reception process, we have availability, and the last thing I'd suggest if you wanted to improve this no-show rate, if let's say it just happens to be a peculiar problem for you, I'll give you what one of our clients did that I thought was a great idea. I heard this years ago at one of our conferences. What he did was he noticed he had a lot of no-shows all of a sudden. So he decided he wanted to figure out what was going on. So he decided he was going to confirm these patients himself the night before. He was going to call himself. So here's a new patient. They haven't met the doctor yet. And the day before, they're getting a call from the doctor. Hi, this is Dr. Smith. I see you're scheduled to come and see us tomorrow at 2. I just wanted to say hi. And, I look forward to meeting you. Are there any questions you have before you see us tomorrow? What he noticed was that the fact that the doctor was picking up the phone and calling was so impressive to these patients. They were taken aback that, wow, the doctor took their time to actually get the doctor's a very respected position. His no-show rate dropped to almost nothing at that point. And it's something that you can try just as sort of a last-minute measure or a final measure if things aren't working the way that you want as far as this the no-shows in your office. Something you can try. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it really depends on how many new patients you see. But if it's 4 or 5 a day, it really didn't take that long to make those phone calls. Plus, you've already established some communication with that patient before they come in the door. All right, so let's say your problem isn't no-shows. There's just not enough new patients scheduled. All right, you need to see 10 a week, and there's only 3 scheduled. Well, let's take a look at what could be going wrong there. Well, the first thing I'll talk about, and this may or may not be something that you do in your practice, is you have to have some record of all of the responses to your marketing or referral campaigns. You have to have some kind of a record, what we call a new patient log. This could be a spreadsheet. It could be a little form next to all the phones in the practice, but you have to have a new patient log. Because I'll tell you right now, we've talked about this before in other episodes, but the new patient log is the easiest thing for whatever reason to fall out. People will forget to enter names. I'm too busy. I don't have time for this. If you're how much are you spending on marketing? You might be spending thousands and thousands of dollars a month. If you don't have an accurate record of the people responding to your marketing, you're not going to be able to track your marketing's effectiveness, and you're going to make bad decisions. So you have to put this in, and it's like anything you ever want to implement in the practice. You don't just, if you have implementation problems, you don't just say, hey, I want people to fill this out and never check on it again. You bring it up all the time till it's being done consistently. There has to be oversight. So you might bring it up in a staff meeting. You may train people on how to do it. And then you check up on it regularly. And if errors are made, you get those corrected as quickly as possible. But this new patient log is gold. You have to keep this in the office. Whether it's analog or digital, it really doesn't matter. Because what'll happen is, let's say 15 people called this week, but we only noted 3 that called that we actually scheduled. I've seen that done before. People only enter people in, you'll have someone at the front desk only entering patients in the log who actually scheduled. What about the 12 who didn't? You have no way of ever recovering that or fixing that or knowing what your problem even is. So you have to have a new patient log. It's very simple. As a matter of fact, on the episode webpage, we'll put a sample of one of these that you can download if you'd like. But, it would have their name. It would have their phone number, because obviously you want to get that quickly in case you get disconnected. What they responded to. All right. That's also critical. What they were calling about and when they were scheduled for. All right. Those are some basic things. There might be more on there, but those are the basic things. Because then you can pull this log out. And let's say we had 15 calls last week and only 3 people scheduled. Well, then our problem isn't number of phone calls. I mean, maybe you'd want more than that. But our problem is the number of people that we actually scheduled. Do you see the difference here? So you have to be able to log the number of calls that you're getting in. Because I will tell you, and we talked about this a few episodes back in episode 3, the one rethinking the receptionist position, the conversion rate, the percentage of calls that patients calling into your practice or potential patients calling into your practice, the percentage of those calls that get converted into actual new patients in the U.S. is terrible on average. It's horrible. There was a study done by a company called Viva Concepts out of Glendale, California. They listened to 10,000 of these phone calls, new patient phone calls, and they found that the average conversion rate in a dental practice was 23%. So let me give that to you in basic math. That means that if you're the average practice, if you get 100 new patient phone calls, only 23 of these people will actually become new patients. What about the other 77? All right. That has to do with reception skills. That doesn't have to do with the number of responses you're getting. But if you're sitting back and looking at this, you could go, oh, well, my marketing's not working. I'm only getting this many new patients. Well, that's not a marketing problem. Marketing's job is to create a response. That's marketing's job. Once the response is created, marketing has done its job. Once that response is created, it's reception's job, or whoever's answering your phone and scheduling new patients, it's their job to get them to actually come in. So that's something that has to be heavily, heavily, heavily scrutinized. So why might we have issues with this? Well, we talked about this in episode 3 as far as, what goes wrong, as well as a couple pointers for your receptionist. But to give you a little bit of a thumbnail, number one, there's a really good chance that you have some type of software that records phone calls into your practice. There's a very good chance. Most practices have this now. My first question for you, and I talked about this in one of these other episodes, how often do you listen to these? Usually, most people, if they do listen at all, listen when there's a problem. Trust me, I survey seminars of new clients and I see this. How many people listen to these? Hardly any hands go up. So you have this great software that records this stuff, but if you're not listening to it, you won't even see that you have a problem. And if you're only listening to it when you have a problem, that's sort of, catching tooth decay when it's a root tip. All right. You want to catch it when you just have a little pit. So if you're listening to these regularly at random every week, the office manager, you'll pick up on these things and correct your receptionist quickly so you don't have this problem, as well as figure out what training you have to do with your receptionist in order to increase their conversion rate. It's critical. So the other things I'd say about receptionists specifically is there tends to be things with shopper calls, So again, I'm keeping this new patient log, and someone calls in, and I get their name and number, and they ask, how much do we charge for a crown? You get these calls. And for some reason, there's almost a negative attitude towards shoppers. Oh, it's just a shopper. Like shoppers are bad. Well, if you think shoppers are bad, here would, I guess, be my question for you. Have you ever bought anything because there was some type of a deal? I would guarantee you everybody listening to this, at least 99%, have done that. Well, you were a shopper, all right? We're all shoppers at some point. And there's a couple things you have to know about a shopper. If I call your practice asking how much a crown is, well, obviously you'd want to find a few things out for me, which we'll talk about in a second, but I probably need more than one. If I went to a practice and they told me I needed 1 crown and I'm going to save $200 by coming to your office, I'm probably not going to leave my dentist for that. But if I need 6, well, that's $1,200 I might leave. You see, if that's really what's important to me, right? If that's what's important to me. So if you have a shopper call in, you don't want to have this disdainful view towards these folks. You want to ask some questions. Obviously, you get their name and the number, and you'd want to find out, okay, how much are you charging for a crown? You can say, listen, I'm more than happy to answer that for you. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions first? Sure. Well, first off, what makes you think you need a crown? Well, I went and saw this other dentist across town, and they told me I needed 4 crowns. Okay, well, where in your mouth are these teeth located? And you get that data. Do you have any sensitivity to hot or cold? You're establishing some communication. Does anything hurt when you eat? Or whatever questions you might want to ask. Well, obviously, your front desk can't diagnose whether the patient needs a crown or not. We know this. So then they could say, listen, I don't know what you need. Obviously, the doctor would have to look at you to determine if you even need a crown. All right. So what I would do is schedule a time for you to come and see the doctor. We do a complimentary examination if you have your x-rays, or we charge $29 for an x-ray, or whatever it is you want to do. And the doctor can look at you and figure out what you need. Right? Then, of course, they're going to want to know, well, how much is the crown? Okay, if they do. Otherwise, they may just go ahead and schedule. Oh, well, a crown can range anywhere from, your low-end fee to your high-end fee. All the way from your basic crown up to a crown and build up, et cetera. So you can give them a range, and that's okay. And some people may not schedule at that point, and that's fine, but you've answered their questions. And all we're doing throughout that whole process is building up some rapport so that we can actually establish enough communication with this patient to go ahead and get them scheduled. So if I've got not enough patients scheduled, I've either A, not got enough responses, right? Or B, I've got the responses and we're not converting them. So that's the next step I'm going to hit on. Do I have a conversion issue? Maybe my responses are fine and my marketing's fine, or my conversion is terrible, in which case I need to do something with my receptionist. Also, the availability issue plays in there too, right? What I wouldn't see, you'd see this with no-shows if we've scheduled people too far out, but you wouldn't necessarily see this if, I've got 100 phone calls and I only scheduled 30 of them, let's say. Well, let's say 20 of the people wanted to schedule, but my first appointment was until 3 weeks from now. Well, that's an availability issue. So that's something I'd have to fix there. There's that availability issue again. I'd have to fix it to make sure that I actually get the patient. All right. So we tracked it all the way back from we don't have enough patients in the chair. So we either didn't have enough scheduled or we had no shows. Now we've gone back behind that where we didn't have enough scheduled. What might be causing that would either be a lack of responses or a conversion rates. We've talked about conversion. I definitely recommend you check out episode 3. Sabri Bloomberg, our deputy chief operating officer, gets into, how your receptionist should handle calls. It's actually really good. So now let's step back to the next step. We found that our conversion rate's fine. Our no-show rate is okay. We're not having a lot of no-shows. We're converting okay. We just don't have enough people calling the office. There's not enough responses. And we've made sure our call log is actually being kept. All right? So at that point, I have to take a look at what isn't working with my marketing. Maybe it's all of it, but specifically, this is where I'm going to want to break things down a little bit because there's a lot of different avenues by which you get new patients. This is where you want to have some effective analytics in place. And I may have said analytics and you go, I don't want to deal with this because it's analytics or whatever. You have to do this. As a business owner, you have to at least have some way of tracking your marketing's effectiveness. So let's take an average dental practice. Well, if you look at where all their new patients are coming from, it's probably from 3, maybe 4 or 5 different sources. You have referrals. There might be people seeing your sign. There might be people responding to your postcard. There might be people finding you on Google or people finding you on Facebook, as an example. There could also be a number of different avenues. But that's 5 different places from which new patients come. That's 5 different sources, all right? So if I'm not getting enough new patients and I'm not getting enough responses, I'm going to want to look at what's not getting me enough response because that's the area I need to fix. I don't need to fix something that's not broken. Let's say Facebook has been getting me 5 new patients a month every month, and my new patients dropped last month from 40 to 20. And I look and Facebook still got me the 5 new patients last month. Well, then I'm not going to bother with Facebook. It's doing what I thought it's supposed to do. I could always go in and improve it later and get it so it's doing a little bit better, but it's not broken. So why am I going to fix something that isn't broken? I want to find something that's broken. I dropped from 40 to 20 and I get new patients from 5 different sources. So what all of a sudden dropped off? This is why I need to measure and track where things are coming from. And you'll sometimes find the silliest things. I've seen it happen to clients where one client in particular, they had a marketing company they were working with, and the marketing company had put up their website and created the phone number. It was specifically a tracking number that patients would call in off of, right? So it wasn't their main office number that they were assigned by the phone company. This was the number that specifically for people responding from the website. All right. So they canceled the contract with the web developer. Well, unknown to them, they also lost the phone number at the same time. All right, you're getting this idea. So meanwhile, they'd printed a bunch of promotion with that phone number on it and mailed it out. Well, these patients were calling a disconnected number. Do you see? Silly things like that can cost you a lot, and you wouldn't even know it. And I've seen this happen with the Yellow Pages. And for those of you young people out there, the Yellow Pages were that big, yellow, stupid book that you used to complain to your parents about, people would leave on your doorstep. At least my kids did. Who keeps leaving this dumb book here? And we used to use the Yellow Pages to, find businesses before the internet. Anyway, so had a client. This was back in the early 2000s. They were getting a lot of new patients from the Yellow Pages. Well, new Yellow Page ad comes out, and then new patients you would expect would go up, right? Well, no, they dropped severely because a lot of his new patients came from the Yellow Pages. So what did he find? He called the number in his Yellow Page ad because the Yellow Pages owned that number. This is when it was a lot more difficult to get, these tracking phone numbers, but they existed back then, but there was a lot more involved. Well, the Yellow Pages owned this phone number, and that Yellow Pages had gone bankrupt. So that phone number was disconnected. So here's his Yellow Pages, which everybody in the city or county had, and there's that phone number. and people are calling it and it's disconnected. Well, he called the phone company, got the number assigned to his office, so he couldn't track those calls anymore like he used to, but at least he got those phone calls again. So those are the more severe examples. You can find more simple examples that would affect your marketing's response rate. Things like if you're doing pay-per-click and you're advertising for cosmetic dentistry 6 towns over where nobody would ever drive from. That happens, right? Or you're advertising at 3 a.m. for cosmetic dentistry. That's usually not when people are looking for it, right? You could have mailers going out to the wrong city. Silly things like this could kill your response, all right? Could kill your response. But let's say none of those things are happening. You're doing a postcard campaign, you're mailing it out, and just nobody's responding. Well, then there might be something validly actually wrong with your postcard or your ad. That could be happening, and that ad or postcard needs to be retooled. That Google ad or that Facebook ad or whatever it is, it's just not very effective, in which case that ad needs to be retooled. And I've seen this before where someone will do an ad and they'll send it out and it just gets no response. Or the second scenario is they'll do an ad, it gets responses at first, and then it starts to drop off. I want to pick up both of those things in that order. So let's say I'm doing an ad. I've printed up a bunch of mail, and I'm mailing it out because people still do look at their snail mail, and that's becoming more and more of a thing as the internet has proliferated with more advertising options. People go back to snail mail. So let's say you're doing snail mail, and you send out, it costs a lot of money to print this stuff, and postage is your biggest expense with mail, depending on what you're printing. And so you send these mailers out, and you're just getting nothing. Well, let's first take a look at what should you even be expecting from a postcard to just the general public in your area. When I survey this at seminars, again, with new clients, just to sort of establish, what is the industry thoughts or what are the industry thoughts on this? When I ask what percentage of responses you should be getting to a postcard to a room full of dentists, new clients, the usual answers I get are 1 to 4%. 1 to 4%. In other words, if I'm sending out 1,000 cards, I should be getting 10 to 40 responses. That's what people think. All right. That is absolutely not true. If you're mailing to people who don't know you, just people who live in your area based on whatever demographics, maybe you're mailing to homeowners or whomever, right? But if you're mailing to people who are not patients in your practice, the average response rate is about 0.25%. 0.25%. All right. So if you send out 10,000 pieces of mail, that would be 25 responses. That's the average. That's the actual average. Now, you could look at that and go, well, that's terrible. I'm sure there's things you can do to improve it. But if I spent to get 10,000 pieces of mail out, I'm probably going to spend anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. So if we get 25 calls and we convert 80% of those because we're really good at it, let's say, that's 20 new patients. So I spent $5,000 for 20 new patients, which is about $250 a new patient. Which isn't a terrible acquisition cost, especially if I have a good referral program and get those people to refer me their family members. Now I'm lowering that cost for each new patient, right? But ultimately, so you first have to have an expectation of what you should be getting from your marketing. But let's say I've sent out those 10,000 postcards and I get, 3 phone calls and we made sure the call logs are fine and the whole thing. We validly got 3 phone calls. Well, and it's gone to the right place and it went to the right mailing list. It wasn't 4 towns over. All those things are fine. Well, that just means my postcard is terrible and I need to fix it. And that right there is usually a big problem when I'm talking to a business owner or a dentist, especially if the dentist or business owner had anything to do with creating the postcard. Here's this postcard. I know people are going to love this. And wow, they didn't respond. Oh, well, it must be something wrong with them. I'll just keep sending it out. All right. Not the way to go. I personally have thrown marketing away that hasn't been working because it cost me a lot more to mail it than to just toss it. I, at that point, don't mind going back to the drawing board. I have to be willing to be wrong. All right. And this is where, not to do a shameless plug, but all of the things I'm talking about in this episode and more, we talk about at the MGE New Patient Workshop, how to do right. So it's something you want to definitely check out. I have a link on the episode webpage where you can find out more about the New Patient Workshop. But if my marketing's not working, that doesn't mean I just don't do marketing at all. I have to figure something else out, right? And by not working, I mean I'm doing all the things right. It's just not getting responses, right? It's not doing what it's supposed to do. So that's the first scenario. I just have to change it at that point. I have to figure out something that will work. And that's where I'd recommend the new patient workshop. But let's say I'm doing something, a postcard or a newsletter, or even Google ads. And I noticed that it was working at first, but the effectiveness is dropping off, right? It used to get this many responses, 10 a day. Now it's getting 5 a day. Then it was getting 2 a day. All right. That type of thinking I have seen occur where someone will make a postcard and they'll mail it out for the first 3 months, and then they mail it out for the next 3 months, and the 3 months after they don't change their Google PPC ad. Marketing after a while gets tired. All right. It can, people start to become numb to it. So you're going to want to make sure your marketing stays fresh. I do the same thing here with our marketing department at MGE. We don't do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, because eventually those results will diminish. Statistically, it's proven. So if I was going to do, let's say, a postcard campaign, I might have 3 or 4 different variations of the postcard, so I'm not sending the same thing out over and over again. Or I would check my Google PPC ads or my Facebook ads, and the second I started to see those drop off, I keep a really sharp eye. I might revise those so that, the ads stay fresh and continue to get response. It's something that you want to keep an eye on to get those. I can tell you a silly story where, we do these free seminars that we used to go all over the country to do. We now do them virtually on, different subjects, scheduling, your hygiene department, improving case acceptance. And we were starting to sour on one of them, one of our case acceptance seminar. It was our free one-day case acceptance seminar. We were souring on it because we were sending a lot of promotion out on it, but the responses weren't coming in. So I looked at it, and I realized the promotion hadn't been changed for over a year. I changed a picture and a little bit of copy. It took me all of, 20 minutes. And the response quadrupled immediately, went back to what it used to be. So it can be that silly, changing the headline on your ad, the picture on your ad. All of a sudden, a person's been getting this postcard or seeing this ad every time they've been opening their wherever they are, their website, or they see you on Google, or they search for a dentist. And then you change it all of a sudden, something is switched up about it and it looks different, and now it resonates with them and they respond. So remember, your marketing gets tired. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. Obviously, if it's working, continue it, but when it starts to drop off, be ready to switch. And I guess ultimately, the answer to all of this is if your marketing is quote unquote not working, the answer is not to stop marketing. And I said this a little bit earlier. The answer is to figure out why. All right. So I know this was a bit of a long podcast and I went into a lot of different things with regards to it, but I wanted to just throw this out there because there's a few simple things you can do in your office to improve this and get the number of new patients that you'd like to be getting. I hope it helped. And if you'd like to know more about the new patient workshop or get a copy of that new patient call log that I was talking about, don't forget to the episode webpage at dentalbusinessrx.com to download it. Otherwise, if you need any other help in your practice, we offer a free practice consultation. You can contact us here at MGE at 800-640-1140 or visit us online at mgeonline.com. Otherwise, folks, have a great week, and we will see you at the next episode.